right, it's time for Parshat Shemot.
Parshah Shemot.
So we have the Moses story in
Yes.
this one.
Very good one.
Very, very much, very, very good. So this is the beginning of the book of Exodus, and all of the sort of Chuck Heston things that you know about in that story happen here.
He didn't play Moses as a baby, though, did he?
Not to my knowledge. That would have been cool if
That
he
would have
did.
been weird. Little
And-
baby Moses with a rifle floating down the river.
Anyway, so a lot of things happen here. We're not going to tell you all of them, but our personal favorite, something that's really interesting, is the burning bush story, the acacia tree that was on fire but was not consumed. And God says, I am that I am, or I am what I am, or I will be what I will be. Depends on what translation you look at it. But nevertheless, it's kind of a way of smacking Moses in the face.
And smacking religious culture in the face from that time, too.
That's absolutely true, because the idea of having a name if you're a god, that's a big thing.
Yeah.
The idea was that if you have a name and you know the name of a god, that you could intone it, and it would give you superpowers, whatever the god's power was.
And that goes along with the idea of names being so powerful. If you know someone else's name, their true name, you have power over them, too. It's the same thing. Just in the same way that in Jewish culture, when someone's sick, we change our name.
Yeah,
Change your name to Chaim or Life or something to try to deflect these evil, the evil eye, these evil
Yeah.
things floating around. So,
so God says, when Moses asks, what is your name? God says, and we'll just go with this translation, I am that I am. And it's kind of a way of saying, hey, Moses, you're not going to get to control me. And that's a pretty powerful thing, that we don't get to decide what God is, because, as Michael said earlier, God isn't and is.
Right. That's the other thing that really sticks out here. When we find out God's name, so to speak, it's not really a name.
It's not even a noun.
Right. In English, we say God, and God is a noun. In Hebrew, nouns not so much.
Right.
In Hebrew, if we translated that name more appropriately to English, it would be something like, as Reb Zalman says, God ain.
Right. There's
This-
an action behind it.
Right, this name is a verb. The name God gives is a verb. And what that implies is that God is not a static thing. God is a process. God is the act of Godding. God is the act of making a space for God and letting God in. That's what we do. And that's what separates Judaism from a lot of other religious traditions, is the idea of mitzvot. And God is not present unless we're doing God, unless we're doing God-like things.
Nice.
And that's how we create, a place for God on earth. That's why we have mitzvot, and that's why Judaism is a religion of action and not of belief specifically,
I think that's really interesting, because in Bereshis, in the past book, it was all about patriarchs dealing with life
Right.
and having God in their life, but they're not necessarily doing very holy things. They're just kind of people living life. It's kind of an amoral thing. And then when you get into the last 4 books of the Torah, it's all about mitzvot. We actually kind of learn truly what mitzvot are in the last 4 books.
Right, and it's striking that in the first parsha we find out God's name, and God says, "My name is doing God things."
Yeah.
And that creates the entire rest of the Torah. That sets the mood for the entirety of the Torah and the entirety of the Jewish people and what the Jewish people are called to do on earth. Tikkun is an action. Bringing God in is an action, and God only lives where we make space for God. And that's a saying from one of the old rabbis. They said, one of the Hasidic rabbis. Now I can't remember his name, but they said, where is God? And he says,
Right.
God is wherever you let him in.
Right.
That's it.
And what's great is that in sort of Americanized Jewish culture, we have this thing of G-O-D spelling G_D or G/D, whatever the case is. And our friend Matthew Roth actually said something really cool. He said, the way that you look at G_D, it's as if there's a space
Right.
that needs to be filled. So
And that's what we do, is we make the world holy by setting apart a space for God to live in, to God to be present.
And if God's name wasn't, in a sense, empty in that way, it might be harder for us to do it.
Right. If God had a plain name, an easy name like Patrick or Michael, it'd be kind of hard,
Yeah.
But with an open name like that, you can't define what God is. And leaving it open like that really creates the opportunity.
Nice. So if you want to learn more about God, about Jewish spirituality, Michael, what have you got to do?
Email michael@punktorah.org, patrick@punktorah.org. Come to punktorah.org. Come to services at oneshul.org. Check out newkosher.org for all your kosher needs.
And enjoy some Shemodiness.
Shemot-tastic.
Nice.